At 6:12 in the morning on a rainy Tuesday, I sat at my kitchen table with a half-eaten granola bar, a client escalation logged the length of a department store receipt, and a headset that felt like it had been permanently fused to the side of my skull. The rain was tapping softly against the double-paned kitchen window, casting long, distorted shadows across the hardwood floor. The coffee maker was dripping slowly, filling the room with the rich, bitter aroma of dark roast. I took a slow sip of the hot liquid, letting the warmth settle in my chest, and stared at the glowing monitor of my laptop. My third call of the day was already well underway. This time with a director in Frankfurt named Friedrich, who wanted to vent about a potential service-level agreement breach that had not even technically occurred yet. Friedrich was shouting so loudly that I had to pull the earpiece away from my head. He kept insisting that if the database replication latency exceeded 5 minutes, their entire European retail operations would experience severe delays. I listened patiently, waiting for him to run out of breath, and then I calmly walked him through our telemetry data. I showed him that the latency was sitting at exactly 12 seconds, and that our backup server in London was ready to take over in the event of an outage. I handled the situation with the same calm, methodical precision I had used for half a decade, slowly bringing his heart rate back down to normal. 10 minutes after that call concluded, my liaison in Manila, Sophia, pinged me about a backlog of onboarding forms stuck in a digital workflow that someone had designed without consulting anyone in actual operations. The database was rejecting the entries because the form field character limits did not match the back-end SQL database schema. I fixed that issue too, writing a quick script to bypass the bottleneck and clear the queue of 300 pending files. This was just another typical Tuesday morning. For 5 years, I had been the quiet, reliable engine keeping our company's largest contract, a $14 million annual agreement, from falling apart. I did not ask for public praise, nor did I make noise in the corporate Slack channels to brag about my achievements. I simply delivered results. My team consisted of Toby, our senior analyst, Clara, who managed vendor data, and 3 junior engineers who were fresh out of university. They respected my experience and relied on my technical guidance, while the rest of the organization chased agile buzzwords and rearranged deck chairs on the PowerPoint Titanic. I was putting out real or operational fires with my bare hands. On a positive note, the founder, Lawrence Thorne, back when he actually ran the daily operations of the company instead of hiding in his Florida estate, once called me his safety net with teeth in front of the entire board of directors. I had laughed at the description then, but I knew exactly what he meant. I was the one who kept the entire structure from free-falling into chaos when things went wrong. We had started this company in a cramped basement office, with only 3 servers bought from an online auction and a broken coffee maker. Back then, the smell of damp cardboard and hot electrical solder filled the room, but we were driven by a shared goal of engineering excellence. Over the years, the company grew. Investors arrived, and the culture slowly shifted from technical competence to corporate bureaucracy and political posturing. But quiet control only works until the volume is cranked up by someone who believes that shouting is the same thing as strategy. Enter Gavin Pemberton. He arrived at our headquarters like a clown shot out of a cannon, wearing expensive loafers with no socks, displaying teeth that were blindingly white, possessing a spreadsheet fetish, and carrying the kind of ego that required its own dedicated onboarding process. His father, Terence Pemberton, who happened to be Lawrence's oldest golf buddy and a major shareholder in our parent company, had pulled several strings behind the scenes to secure Gavin the title of Vice President of Operations before the young man could even spell the word compliance. I met him in the hallway outside the break room on his second day. He was struggling to connect his smartphone to the office printer, swearing under his breath. When he saw my badge, he looked up and said, "You must be Owen Foster. I have heard you basically are this entire account." I offered a polite smile, but we both knew it was not meant as a genuine compliment. To Gavin, my 5 years of institutional knowledge and client trust was not an asset. It was a threat to his authority. At first, Gavin attempted to use charm and awkward fist bumps to win people over. He would walk through the desks offering shallow praise and talking about his ideas for operational synergy. Within a month, however, his approach shifted as he realized I would not bow to his buzzwords. I began noticing meetings where I was suddenly uninvited, project roadmaps that were sent to clients without my review, and process changes that completely ignored the technical realities of the client contract, as if gravity itself were optional. He would copy me on major announcements that directly affected my operations team, then go completely silent when I asked for clarification on the implementation details. At one point, he called my operational methodology legacy operations clutter in a public Slack channel. He did not tag me directly, of course. I was simply meant to be the punchline of his joke about modernization. The worst part was that the rest of the executive team started listening to him. He had the title, the sharp jawline, and a slide deck that featured the word synergy in 42-point font. His PowerPoint deck was filled with stock photos of people pointing at empty computer screens, graphs with arrows pointing up, but no labels on the axes, and 3 slides dedicated to what he called the operational velocity paradigm. He wore his unearned confidence like a cheap cologne, and most of the executives, who were either too tired or too distracted by the upcoming merger discussions, let him spray it everywhere. Meanwhile, I was still doing the actual work, managing the client relationships, handling the early morning crisis calls, and staying up late to proofread technical documentation so that nothing caught fire. My team saw what was happening, but our HR representative, Evelyn, told us to align with Gavin's vision and lean into the digital transformation. That transformation consisted of taking a stable, revenue-generating account and stuffing it into a blender labeled cost optimization. I did not argue with him, not yet. I simply watched, documented every single misstep, and kept my head down. When he called my workflow bloated during a leadership sync, I simply smiled and nodded. I was perfectly content to let the boy hang himself with his own tie. But I will admit, by the 3rd time I was excluded from a key client update, I felt that cold sensation crawl in my chest. It was the feeling that whispers that your time is up and they do not want you there anymore. Still, I possessed leverage that Gavin could not even begin to comprehend, and he was about to find out what happens when you mistake a veteran's silence for submission. The first time Gavin rewrote my project schedule without consulting me, I figured it was merely a rookie mistake. The second time, I attributed it to his inflated ego. By the 3rd time, when he rerouted a $4 million vendor invoice through a newly formed agile task force run by his close college friend, I realized we were not dealing with simple inexperience. We were dealing with entitlement dressed up in a designer blazer. Gavin did not ask for permission. He declared his decisions as law. One morning, I logged into our network and found a brand new workflow tool live for my team. There had been no prior notice, no quality assurance testing, and no integration checks. It was simply a link dropped into our Slack channel with a caption from Gavin. "Try this out, it is cleaner." It was so clean that it did not even feature document version control, causing our analysts to overwrite each other's files. My senior analyst spent 3 hours just trying to figure out how to upload standard files without crashing the central database. The system threw continuous database lock errors, and we lost an entire afternoon of productivity. One of our lead analysts, Clara, had a panic attack because she thought she had accidentally deleted 3 months of client historical data due to the tool's buggy interface. I had to sit with her for 2 hours, manually recovering the data from our cold storage backups, while Gavin was out having a long lunch with his department directors. I flagged the risks repeatedly, compiling a detailed document that outlined the missing escalation steps, the unclear data access permissions, and an API integration that had more security holes than a golf course. I sent the document to our legal department and copied Gavin. He responded with a single line, "Speed over perfection, Owen. We will fix it on the fly." That might be a great slogan for a local pizza delivery service, but it was a terrible philosophy for a $14 million service contract that contained strict financial clawback clauses. Then came the email that he sent department-wide. The subject line read Operational Efficiency Phase 2, and buried in the 4th paragraph was a line that made my jaw tighten. Some legacy processes remain in place due to internal resistance from team members set in their ways, but we appreciate your patience as we modernize. He did not name me directly, but I was the only operations lead still left from the original onboarding team. It was a blatant slap across the face. One of my junior analysts, Toby, messaged me immediately to ask if the email was about me. I did not reply to his message. Instead, I opened the master client contract. Gavin had been making noise about outsourcing the entire implementation arm of the project to an offshore vendor. We will save 30% and look lean for the venture capitalists. He had boasted in a recent meeting, showing a slide with projected savings that were completely unrealistic given the training costs and the language barriers. He did not care that the client service level agreement specifically required a United States-based escalation lead. He did not care that I was explicitly named in the contract as that escalation lead. And he certainly did not care about a clause, buried 47 pages deep, added back in April 2020, during the height of the pandemic, cash-outs, which tied the contract's continuation to my personal presence. When I brought up the contract requirements casually during a leadership sync, Gavin waved his hand dismissively. "We will get the client to sign an amendment," he said, with a smug grin. "It is outdated language from the previous administration." I asked if our legal department had reviewed his offshore transition plan. He smiled and replied, "Legal works for us, Owen. They will sign off on whatever we put in front of them." I could have argued, but I chose to remain silent. I simply bookmarked the clause and sent a quiet, brief email to our general counsel, Timothy, containing nothing but the text of Section 6.4b regarding the continuity of named personnel. There was no commentary, no complaints, and no emotion, just this clause and a timestamp. Shortly after that, the retaliation began. I was systematically removed from the weekly calls with the client. Gavin sent a newly hired customer success manager in my place. A well-meaning but completely overwhelmed individual who thought that SLA stood for service-level agility. The client noticed my absence immediately. "Where is Owen?" they asked on multiple calls. The replacement team replied that I was focused on internal optimization. In reality, I was sitting 3 floors above them, watching the system slowly degrade. The pressure began to build, ending every hallway conversation when I walked past. The polite silences and the sudden calendar updates, removing me from meetings I had led for years, made it clear that I was being erased. But you do not erase someone who built the foundation of the house. Gavin was busy building a sandcastle, forgetting that the land it stood on belonged to someone else. In addition to the contract clause, I had discovered something far more serious during my review of the financial logs. The $4 million invoice Gavin had routed to his friend's Agile task force was a flagrant violation of corporate governance. I conducted the background check on the vendor, Vanguard Agile Systems Limited Liability Company, and discovered it had been incorporated in Delaware exactly 14 days prior to the first invoice. Its registered office was a post office box in a strip mall, and its sole officer was a college friend of Gavin named Keith. This was a direct breach of the fiduciary duty of loyalty. Under Delaware General Corporation Law, Section 144, transactions between a corporation and an entity in which its officers have a financial interest are voidable unless they are disclosed in good faith and approved by disinterested directors. I downloaded the Articles of Incorporation from the Delaware Division of Corporations portal, and the details were undeniable. Under Section 144, the transactions were void or voidable. I compiled the evidence, including bank routing numbers and corporate filings, and drafted a formal whistleblower report. Under Section 1514A of Title 18 of the United States Code, also known as the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, employees who report reasonable beliefs of mail fraud, wire fraud, or shareholder fraud are protected from any form of employment retaliation. I submitted this filing directly to Timothy and the Securities and Exchange Commission's whistleblower portal. I now had federal protection, and Gavin had no idea he was walking into a legal minefield. To understand why Section 6.4b was so powerful, one had to look back to April 2020. The world was gripped by uncertainty, and our largest client was on the verge of walking away from a $14 million contract due to operational instability. I spent weeks in my spare bedroom, which had become a temporary war room, coordinating midnight deployments and stabilizing the client's infrastructure. The client's head of risk management, Genevieve, was a no-nonsense executive who valued reliability above all else. Genevieve was sitting in her office overlooking the harbor, her glasses resting on the bridge of her nose when she gave us the ultimatum. During a tense negotiation call, she looked straight into the camera and said, "We need continuity. Owen, you are the only reason this system is still standing. If you leave, we leave." I looped in our legal department and we drafted a clause that Genevieve's team modified with three critical words, specifically Owen Foster. Our general counsel at the time had questioned the wisdom of tying a multi-million-dollar contract to a single individual, but Genevieve did not blink. "Your organization sells stability," she remarked. "Owen is that stability." Lawrence Thorne, eager to close the deal and secure the revenue, had signed the papers with a gold pen, laughing about how Owen was the most expensive security blanket he had ever purchased. The clause was signed and executed, securing the account during a time when other service providers were collapsing, Section 6.4b stated. In the event that the named escalation officer, Owen Foster, voluntarily resigns his employment with the service provider, the client reserves the unilateral right to terminate this agreement immediately without further obligation, notice, or financial penalty. Gavin, who only read the summarized slide decks prepared by his administrative assistant, had never looked at the original executed document. He assumed that every role in the company was plug and play, easily replaceable by offshore resources. After the initial corporate friction, I pulled the original document from my personal archive, uploaded it to our secure legal repository, and labeled the metadata as original version, executed April 2020. I did not send an alert. I simply left it there to wait. 2 days after I submitted the whistleblower report regarding Gavin's self-dealing, Evelyn from HR called me into her office. Her office was decorated with artificial ferns and framed posters about team unity, which felt incredibly ironic given the circumstances. Evelyn's voice was strained, and she looked like she had drawn the short straw in a very difficult negotiation. She started with the standard corporate deflection, suggesting that there had been a miscommunication during the recent leadership meeting. "Gavin's comments were not personal," she said, offering a weak smile. "He is still finding his rhythm in our culture." I sat in silence, letting the tension fill the room until she became visibly uncomfortable. "He muted me on a call with the board of directors, Evelyn," I finally said. She offered the typical HR response, asking if we could frame my transition as a strategic pivot and requesting that I assist with the offshore handoff. I looked her in the eyes and asked a direct question. "Am I being let go?" Evelyn immediately backpedaled, assuring me that I was highly valued and still employed. They wanted the transition completed before they took any formal action against me, unaware that the federal whistleblower protections under Section 1514A of Title 18 of the United States Code prevented them from taking any adverse action. Outside the HR office, my team was beginning to panic. Toby, my senior analyst, stopped me near the elevators, his face pale. "Owen, there are rumors going around about the contract. Is it true that the client can walk if you quit?" I did not confirm or deny the rumor. I simply told him to focus on his work and avoid downloading any internal files to his personal devices. "Let us not give them any reason to conduct a security audit," I advised him. Meanwhile, Graham, a junior attorney in our legal department, cornered me in the hallway. He looked nervous, his eyes darting back and forth as if he were carrying state secrets. "Is Section 6.4b still active?" he whispered. I smiled and suggested he check the signature page in the legal repository. Within hours, the access logs for that specific file showed a flurry of activity from the legal team. They were beginning to realize the magnitude of the situation. The clock was ticking. The client was growing increasingly distant, and Gavin was still posting motivational quotes on Slack, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to break over his career. I quietly prepared my final steps. I cleared my desk, packing my favorite coffee mug and a few personal photos into a cardboard box. I wiped my browser history and left the desk completely clean. I was ready. The quarterly all-hands meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday. The digital atmosphere was thick with tension, and the attendee count quickly climbed to 137 employees. including several board members and key investors. Gavin was slated to lead the presentation on operational efficiency. I logged into the meeting at 8:59 with my camera off and my microphone muted. Beside my laptop lay my physical security badge and a printed copy of my signed resignation letter. Gavin began the call with his characteristic enthusiasm, displaying slides filled with graphs that promised massive cost savings through his offshore transition strategy. "We are modernizing our operations," he declared, his voice booming through the speakers. "By transitioning these legacy accounts to our offshore partners, we will achieve 30% savings and greater agility." He was speaking as if the transition were already a done deal, completely ignoring the contractual requirements and the formal warnings I had filed. When it was my turn to present the current delivery metrics, I turned on my microphone and began sharing my screen. I had only spoken 6 sentences, presenting the solid, undeniable performance of the account when Gavin interrupted me. "Actually, Owen," he said, offering a condescending smile to the camera, "this will be the last time you present these metrics. As of next week, we are outsourcing this project. Your team will be transitioned to the new offshore model." Before I could respond, my screen share was abruptly terminated, and a notification appeared, indicating that the host had muted my microphone and revoked my presenter privileges. I looked at the gallery view. My square was frozen, showing me mid-sentence, completely silenced in front of the entire company, the board, and the shareholders. Gavin immediately transitioned to a slide showing his friend's Agile Task Force as the new oversight committee. The humiliation was public, deliberate, and recorded on the company's servers, but I did not react. I did not attempt to unmute myself, nor did I send a furious message in the chat. I simply stared directly into my web camera, maintaining eye contact with the lens. In the gallery view, I noticed Timothy, our general counsel, sitting forward in his chair, his expression shifting from corporate indifference to deep concern. He took out a notepad and began writing furiously. Timothy knew the law. He knew that under Section 1514A, muting a registered whistleblower who had reported a $4 million interested party transaction under Delaware General Corporation Rest Law, Section 144, while stripping him of his responsibilities, was a textbook example of unlawful retaliation. It was a clear violation of federal whistleblower protections. Gavin thought he was demonstrating authority. In reality, he was documenting his own liability on a recorded Zoom call. The private messages on my screen began to flash rapidly as colleagues expressed their shock. Clara messaged me, "This is hostile." Toby wrote, "Is this even allowed?" I did not reply. I locked my eyes onto the little blue dot of my laptop's web camera. I quietly closed my laptop, let them sit in the silence of my absence. Let Gavin attempt to explain the technical details of the transition without the only person who understood how the system actually functioned. I walked out of the building and went home, knowing that the trap was set and the fuse was lit. At 9 o'clock in the morning on the following Monday, the second company-wide meeting commenced. The digital room was filled with an uneasy silence. I logged in exactly 1 minute early, keeping my camera off. At 9 o'clock sharp, Gavin opened the meeting, attempting to project his usual confidence, though his smile seemed forced. "Good morning, team," he began. "We are moving forward with our transition plan, and we expect the offshore team to take full control by the end of the week." That was the moment I turned my camera on. I did not speak, nor did I unmute my microphone. Instead, I stood in front of my camera and held up my signed resignation letter in one hand and my physical security badge in the other. Behind me, I had set my virtual background to a stark black screen with bold white text that read, "Resignation effective 9:01 in the morning." The silence that fell over the call was absolute. 137 people stared at their screens in stunned disbelief. Gavin stopped mid-sentence, his jaw dropping slightly. "Owen, we can discuss this offline," he stammered, his voice cracking. I did not respond. I simply held the resignation letter and badge steady for 30 seconds, ensuring that everyone on the call, including the investors and board members, could see the document. I then clicked the button to leave the meeting. It was exactly 9:01 in the morning. My resignation was official. The moment I logged off, the corporate Slack channels erupted into chaos. Screenshots of my video feed were shared across private groups. The link to the secure legal repository containing Section 6.4b was circulated among the staff. Timothy, the general counsel, did not wait for the meeting to end. He left the call immediately and dialed Genevieve, the client's head of risk management. When he reached her, his voice was clipped and professional. "Genevieve, I am calling to discuss Owen Foster's status. We are currently managing a transition." Genevieve cut him off. "We are not transitioning, Timothy," she said coldly. "Owen Foster has resigned. I received his formal notice at 9 o'clock this morning. As of 9:01 in the morning, we are officially activating Section 6.4b of our agreement. Our termination notice has already been sent to your chief executive officer." 21 hours and 13 minutes after my resignation, the formal contract termination notice was delivered. The company had lost its largest account, $14 million in annual revenue, in a single day. The fallout was immediate. The venture capital firm that had been negotiating a major acquisition of the company pulled out of the discussions, citing a lack of operational stability and severe legal risks. The company's valuation plummeted by double digits overnight. Timothy wasted no time. He presented the board of directors with the evidence of Gavin's self-dealing regarding the $4 million invoice, along with the recorded Zoom calls documenting the retaliation against a protected whistleblower. Under Delaware General Corporation Law Section 144, the board voted unanimously to void the contract with the Agile Task Force. Gavin Pemberton was suspended immediately and terminated for cause by the end of the week. His father's golf buddy status could not save him from a clear violation of the fiduciary duty of loyalty and the federal protections of Section 1514A of Title 18 of the United States Code. Timothy explained that the company was facing a potential multi-million-dollar lawsuit for retaliation under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Section 1514A of Title 18 of the United States Code. Lawrence Thorne, the founder, sent a company-wide email that was later leaked to the industry. The subject line read, "You muted the named person." The email was a scathing condemnation of Gavin's arrogance. "We entrusted him with our most valuable asset," Lawrence wrote, "and instead, we got ego. You do not silence the named person on a contract and expect no consensus." Meanwhile, I was sitting in my kitchen, enjoying a quiet cup of coffee and watching the rain fall. My phone rang, and Genevieve's name appeared on the screen. She offered me a position as a senior consultant to oversee the transition of their operations to a new service provider, offering a salary that was 50% higher than my previous compensation. My new office was located in a modern glass tower downtown, with a view that stretched all the way to the river. The workspace was quiet and professional, a stark contrast to the chaotic open floor plan of my former employer. I had my own dedicated team of 6 analysts who were eager to learn and execute our methodologies without the constant interference of unqualified managers. I accepted the offer. A few days later, a large bouquet of crimson roses arrived at my home. The note attached was signed by Lawrence Thorne, asking if I would consider returning to the company under my own terms. I did not reply to his message. I simply placed the note in my desk drawer next to a copy of Section 6.4b. I had never raised my voice, yet they had finally listened.